Welcome back to the show. We have got a really cool one. It's been one of the topics I've wanted to tackle, for a little while. And we finally got an author whose book revolves around her own personal experience with near-death experiences. Her name, Rosemary Thornton, and her book is "Remembering the Light." Get the title here. So, "How Dying Saved My Life." That's available on Amazon. This Her story is really compelling. Stuff she went through. I mean, it's most people would crumble under what she had to face, and the fact that not only did she make it through that, and she's here, so with the outlook that she has is really amazing. And so we're to sit back. We are going to tackle this. We're going to talk near-death experience with Rosemary Thornton, and that is right now.
Welcome to the Three Beards podcast. My name is Craig, along with Austin and Chris.
Passed to a new generation of Americans born in this century.
Let me out.
I'm afraid that is quite
then live to send the innocent to their death? Is this justice and honor in Massachusetts colony?
All right, gentlemen, how are you tonight?
Wonderful. It's like that saying, there's like 10,000 windows open and somebody's playing music. That's happening right now. I literally have 20 tabs open trying to log into the StreamYard, and I don't know where there's music coming from. Seriously.
I had the same thing. I don't know what it is, but for some reason, something changed. And if I have the speaker to the computer on, I hear an echo. I'm talking through my phone.
Yeah.
It makes no sense to me. All right, enough about our problems. Now let's bring on Rosemary Thornton with us tonight. How are you?
I'm well. How about you?
Doing very well. I mean, really appreciate you coming on the show.
You're very welcome.
I hopefully got the title right. Remembering the Light, How Dying Saved My Life.
Dying Saved My Life, yes.
And that's available. You can get to that. I'm going to show it right here for everybody too on the screen here. Is you can, and for those listening, I could explain it to you. Go to temporarydeath.com. You can contact her. You can also, there's a real, if you don't want to do the typing into Amazon, you can easily just right here, just click right there on there. It's right above the contact thing, and that way you can pick up the book. It's one of those things, and I'm just gonna, I mean, obviously, because you can do it, so much better than I can. We'll just start off with for me is what was it about this story that kind of prompted you, like you felt that it needed to be put on paper and for everybody to read?
That's a great question. I really appreciate that because I get asked the same 12 questions over and over. I do appreciate that very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
I've written 9. Pardon?
Oh no, you said you're welcome. That's right. Yeah.
I've written 9 books, primarily on architectural history, old houses, and writing a book's an awful lot of work. And after I had this experience, I had been a newspaper reporter years ago. And after I was out of the hospital and back home, I got out my laptop, still resting in bed, and I wrote down every single detail I could remember. It was about 40 pages. And I realized later I didn't need to do that because the memory of it all was so vivid. But I gave a couple talks in my community probably about a year and a half after the NDE, And I told a story about one of the things that had happened. And one of the medical professionals in the audience was so shocked at this particular story. She said, "You need to write a book to help others." And, that's kind of a saw we all heard: take your pain and turn it into a blessing for others.
Mhm.
But it took me 3 years to put this together and we'll talk about why, and I guess in a minute, but when I was done and my story started hitting the airwaves and in greater numbers, thanks to Zoom and videos and all that stuff, it's now been heard by more than 13 million people. I get an awful lot of emails. And I think perhaps the most compelling part of my story is that it kind of proves we go on. I know other stories have done that
Mhm.
as well. I don't mean to discount or diminish anybody's story. But one of the things that happened at the time of my NDE, or actually I prefer to call it a temporary death experience. Near death experience is, you're on an airplane and things are going bad and, it looks like it's going down at the last minute, everything's saved and everybody is well. That's coming close to death. I actually had no heartbeat and no blood pressure, no vital signs for more than 10 minutes. That's not near death. That is death. And I am a wordsmith. Uh, so
Wow.
as the story got out more and more, what I was going to say, at the time of my death, I'd been diagnosed with stage 2 cancer. In fact, it was a related surgery that actually sent me to my reward. And I was promised in heaven, if I agreed to come back, I'd be completely healed and restored. And that was proven. A subsequent medical test affirmed that literally what she said was there was not one cell left in my body of cancer. So I was completely healed of that. And also I had been dealing with a lot of grief and sadness and regret, and that was healed as well. And after this, I came back, I changed my life. I sold all my personal belongings, sold my car, sold my home, and I moved 1,000 miles due west to the Midwest. I had been living on the East Coast because I just wanted to literally sit on the edge of these 1,000-acre cornfields in southwestern Illinois and watch the corn grow. And people laugh at that and they think it's funny, but that's legit. That's for real. I just wanted to watch things grow. I wanted to be around beauty. I wanted to be around the beauty of the Midwest. I know people love the coast, but I don't know. I just wanted to watch things grow. And
Right.
also, there's something about the Midwest. Around here, I'm actually in the southwestern part of Illinois, and you can look out at these fields, these expansive fields, and we're not too far from the bluffs of the Mississippi. And the landscape is so beautiful, and you can see for miles. And like now
Mhm.
we're in summer, and when a thunderstorm comes up, you can see those thunder clouds from, I don't know, 10, 20 miles away. There's just a unique beauty to the Midwest that I've really enjoyed.
I, you know, you know, tell me if you believe the same too. I come from Oregon. There was cornfields. There was these fields. So and when I was visiting my sister, she was in Decatur, Illinois at the time. So we went through there, and there's almost this hypnotic type of feeling if you just sit there and watch with just the corn swaying back and forth like in the breeze. It's
Yes, that is it. The tassel.
yeah, and it's really cool. It's just the sound too. It's this weird like rustling sound. It's really calming.
It is. And that's one of the things I do. I still sometimes get pretty anxious, pretty concerned. And I will find a bunch of trees and I will sit by the trees and I will just watch them gently sway back and forth and kind of tune myself into that gentle swaying motion. It is very, very, as you say, calming.
Yeah, we have back in the West Coast, they're quaking aspens.
Oh,
We had those. And so what the sound, just when the thing, you just hear like little rustling, and it was just as the tiny leaves would just kind of shake, you would hear this sound. And so especially if you're along a stream, which they really like to be along bodies of water, it has almost that same type of thing. You can really just get that peaceful, meditation thing when you're actually in these things. So it's hiking through the woods. It's actually really calming when you're along some of these groves, because it's pretty cool. And so that's
absolutely.
no. So
let's say I know anything about that, but I'm ready to hear the near death experience. I'm a true Floridian, so I know cornfields around here. I don't know.
Yeah, probably the closest thing like here in Florida would be like if you're along the lake with all the reeds.
Oh, that's a good point.
Where you just hear that sound.
Swamps even. Yeah, and even the swamps. The swamps are very beautiful there. I spent some time in Florida. I don't know, but there's something about the center of the country and the storms. We have the best storms. But yes, I don't mean to digress.
Oh no, you're good.
That's the same thing, Craig. Like
that's our show.
When you go to the woods, we don't get cold down here, but when we try to go hunting, and just the oak trees, and when you go out there, it's just peaceful. I mean, literally, when at first thing in the morning, there's nothing going on. It's just dead quiet. It's eerie, honestly, when you're just out there listening to absolutely nothing from a forest. But it's the same thing.
It is. Actually, I'm a big fan of trains. I love trains, especially the old steam locomotives. And I will go to a track somewhere, just sit there for hours, sit in the car, or even pull out a lawn chair and wait for the train to go by. And the beauty part about doing that in the Midwest is people say, why are you sitting there just waiting for a train? Well, part of it's hearing the birds, and part of it's listening to the trees. And so it's a whole experience. I guess it's akin to golfing or fishing, of any of those things. You know, you have 2 hours of staring into space and 30 seconds of excitement.
Everything's different. Everyone has different aspects of stuff, but
yeah, I think what cured me in my of like waiting and listening for trains was when we lived in a town. It's like at 2 a.m. The guy would come through the town, and you could hear him miles down the track, and he held the horn the entire way past the house.
Oh, they're not supposed to do. I think it's 2 longs, 1 short, and a long. I think, or maybe it's 2 shorts, 1 long, and a short. I don't remember.
Oh, he would just hold it because there's so many train track crossings, like where we live. So it's like a span of like 9 or 10 crossings. He would hold it down the entire way through. And it's just like, so after a while, you're just like, oh, yeah, train horns. I got nothing. I got no love for those. But yeah, well, let's get to the nasty part, and then we'll get on from there. So I started with this, what really kind of started, the beginning of this whole thing was the unfortunate passing of your husband. When he.
Yes, I had been a writer. I've written for everything. I've written, anything for a buck seems to be my motto. I've written for, I've written ad copy in newspapers. Internet, of course. I've written an awful lot through my years. I'm a very sensitive soul. Most writers, most creative types tend to be very sensitive. And I thought I had met the love of my life. He was brilliant. He was sophisticated. He was well-traveled. He was extremely well-educated. A brilliant mind, probably an IQ well north of 180.
Wow.
One of the most brilliant minds I'd ever encountered. And I mean, I've been around academics and all kinds of pretty smart cookies, and they were absolutely paled in comparison to him. So he had a good job. He was professional. We lived in a beautiful place. There were times I suffered with depression. We all get sad when life gets hard. And he would always look in my eyes and hold me, and he would say, we have a good life. We have a good life. We have a beautiful home. We have plenty of everything that we need. We have a good life. And so this was just so unbelievable. Yeah, he came home one day for lunch and put a gun in his mouth and ended his life. And I was out of town at the time, got home as fast as I could. I was about 800 miles away. And I flew home immediately, of course. And that was, so anyway, that was April 2016. And thus began me losing my mind. And I had, I guess, I don't know, psychotic break, nervous breakdown. There were times that I would just wander around. My friend called it the 100-yard stare, where I'd get a look in my eyes and I wouldn't respond. And I was pretty jacked up. And at one point, a couple friends tried to take me into their homes, but I was too messed up. I was doing this wandering thing in the middle of the night. I'd have terrible nightmares. So a friend stepped forward. I had actually started to live out of my car briefly. And people were like, oh, I get some pretty nasty emails. Overwhelmingly, they're beautiful emails I get. But somebody said, this doesn't make any sense. Why would you live out of your car if you had a home? Well, you know what? That home was a place I could not go back to. That home was a place where I couldn't sleep in anymore. It's etc.
I just, to stop you right there. I mean, just think about it. When I was listening to your story, I'm like, I can't even begin to imagine what the emotion is when you walk through that door for the first time. I mean, it's just everywhere you look has to be this flood of emotions and memories. I mean, I can imagine you had to get out of there.
I did have to get out of there so that, and people recognize, I mean, I'm very sensitive. Yeah. I had to get out of there to save my life. And I ended up in my car, and I only lived out of the car briefly. And to me, it makes perfect sense. One, it was a nice car. It was Camry, had very comfortable seats, sunroof, nice sound system. But it was the only place I could find that was comfortable. And it didn't have memories of him. And I think if there was probably one quantifying feature, it was that car didn't have memories of my husband. And I had spent a lot of time in that car traveling as an author, traveling to fun places to visit folks. So I was in my car. Then a very, very dear friend, I mean, she was really on the periphery of my life. Her name was Tracy. She found out that I'd been getting pretty darn comfortable in that car. And I don't know how much y'all know about PTSD and severe trauma and all that other stuff, but when somebody stops sleeping in a bed and stops living a normal life like that, really what's happening is they're circling the drain. They're beginning a downward spiral. So my friend recognized that, and she said, I don't want to hear about you sleeping in that car anymore. You're coming home to live with me. And I said, Tracy, I've tried this with multiple people. It has not worked. I'm a mess. And, it's kind of fun. I had some success with my books on historic architecture. And by success, I mean I sold enough copies to, I was on PBS History Detectives, and I was on different morning news shows, and I had a good run with it. I had a lot of publicity, not a lot of money, but I had a lot of fun. So people loved it that, saying, oh, that's my friend on television, so that's pretty cool. But my friend Tracy said, I told her I'm not that person. She died. She's gone. Died with my husband. My husband was the love of my life. In fact, something she told me, my husband's death actually made AP News, got picked up by AP. But she was driving around in her car, and she heard that he had killed himself. And she said she pulled over and she sobbed. She pulled off the road and cried for a minute. And she said and she didn't tell me this till much later, but the first words out of her mouth, alone in her car, were, we're going to lose Rosemary. She's not going to survive this. And I think that was a legitimate concern. So I didn't know what to do. But anyway, Tracy took me in for 4 months, took care of me. That was huge, just huge, because I had lost a tremendous amount of weight. I was not able to swallow food. It just felt like my throat was locked up. I was living on liquid nutrition drinks and on and on. So under Tracy's care, I started to eat a little bit again. And then after that, another friend said he would rent a house with me and he would take care of me because I needed a caretaker. And that's quite something, to go from being a successful author of a niche topic, which I was. My book was The Houses That Sears Built. To go from being a successful traveler, successful author who travels all over the country, planes, trains, and automobiles, literally, to be a woman that can't eat food and needs help taking care of a dog, which I had a dog. So 29 months passed this way, and I knew that when people say, how are you doing? Nobody really wanted to know. What they wanted to know is, I need to know that you feel better so I don't have to worry about feeling bad around you. Because when you have trauma of this level, something folks don't understand, people are afraid it's contagious. I mean, mentally, somewhere in their head, they kind of isolate you from the pack. And they say, okay, that was a scary thing. And then, as we were talking about briefly before we went on air, people come up with all these reasons why it happened to you, but it's not going to happen to them. Everything from karma to, I pay attention to my husband. And then one of my favorites is, even at the funeral, it was a closed casket service for obvious reasons. But not before the funeral home charged me $14,000 to put him back together, and then told me his remains were not suitable for viewing. But anyway, even at the funeral, and people are coming forward, at the reception line and everything, and you see them, the couples, squeezing their loved one a little tighter around the waist as they approach, because I am their worst nightmare. My life is their worst hell on earth. And they come up to me, and more than one person said, I don't know what I'd do if anything happened to my Bobby. I think I'd just lay down and die. Do not say stuff like that, because what you're saying is that you love your person more than I love my person. And I don't know how I didn't die. I don't know why I didn't die. I don't know why I survived this. And then 29 months after this, I had learned how to play a part. I had become an Oscar-worthy actress, and I had put together a plan of how to end my own life. I couldn't take it anymore. And I was saying life through sheer willpower. Also, and I just couldn't take the pain. So I put together a plan how to end my life. Pardon?
Can I interject a little bit on that? The people that might have not have known you were living out of your car, and they say, well, I don't know what would happen if something happened to my Bobby. I am dying inside. I'm literally just in pieces right here just talking to you. So that's like such an insensitive thing to say. Like, I just lost my husband here, and now you're like, well, I don't know what would happen if I lost my Bobby. You'd probably feel the same way, if not worse than I'm feeling, because I'm strong right now. I'm trying to be strong, but that's crazy. Somebody would walk up to you and say something like that.
Yeah. People are very foolish, and they don't know how to deal with this level of trauma. This wasn't that he died in the hospital bed of old age or a disease process. No. He did a very violent thing. and it had a very violent outcome. So, and I was a sensitive soul. As a dear friend told me early on, it wasn't, it was the suicide plus my sensitivity was a very bad mix. And also I'm prone to guilt, and I reviewed, you talk about going into that house. It's funny what you remember, but I remember going into the large attached garage and I saw his work boots on the stairs into the house. And I thought I was going to throw up. And I was like, why am I looking at his work boots and feeling so nauseous? And I realized we had a big argument about those work boots. They had disappeared and I had borrowed them and we couldn't find them. And it was a terrible argument. It's one of those arguments that turns into, well, I thought you had them and I thought you had them. And it becomes jugular about, the thing that happened 6 months ago that you're back. So it become a jugular argument. And I looked at those boots and I thought, you did this. You killed him. Look at the way you talked to him about those boots. And that's the worst part of suicide. Suicide is a death like no other because you review every single conversation you ever had. And you say, is that what did it? Is that why he did this? How do I ever forgive myself? So 29 months out, I'm learning how to play the part. But meanwhile, in fact, I had written I had 3 prayers I prayed every single night. One of them is, God, either heal me or let me die. Second prayer was, when I die, spare me the life of you. I had been tormented by nightmares that you can well imagine. And in my nightmares, I relived the incident again and again and again and again and again. And one of the nightmares was I came around the corner of the house just as I saw him getting the gun. And I would run to him and say, please don't do this. We can stop this right now, but please don't do this. And invariably in every nightmare, he did it before I got to him. So I asked God, no life reviews. I know I fell apart. I know my life went to hell. I don't need to see it again in a life review. And then my third prayer, after his death, there were some pretty messy legal issues that needed to be untangled. So I told God, I'm tired of making decisions. And something I mentioned in my book was that I could not handle decisions to the point that I didn't even know what to wear in the morning. So I bought 12 white polo shirts and 4 pairs of blue jeans. And every morning I put on a fresh shirt and some blue jeans, and that was it. I couldn't even decide what to wear. So 29 months passed this way. I had some pretty alarming symptoms. I went to a doctor. I ended up going to 2 doctors, and I was diagnosed with cervical cancer stage 2. And I thought, God, when I said heal me or let me die, I thought I was pretty clear, like fast, not from some horrible disease process. And I where do you go when, I had been a woman of faith my whole life, but to whom do you turn when you think God is the one doing this? And I couldn't even understand why I was going through this. I had prayed for this man every day of his life. Nothing made sense. When your whole taproot goes into believing that God, the creator, loves you, and that's taken away from you, where do you go? So that was the state I was in. So I was diagnosed. I was scheduled to start chemo. It was once a week chemo, daily radiation for 6 weeks, 70% chance it would cure it. And I asked the doctor, and what if it doesn't? And he said, then we start again. And we do it again and again and again until it's all gone. And, being the poster child for, I can't believe this happened to me, I wasn't really feeling really good about that 30% chance that this wouldn't work. So they were doing a cervical biopsy to determine how far the cancer had spread. They were taking some flesh from different places. And I woke up from that biopsy and I told the attending RN that something had gone very wrong. I was bleeding profusely. She said, honey, once you get home and lie down, you'll be fine. I told her 2 more times something was wrong. 2 more times she dismissed me. I had a witness. She sent me home, got home, realized I was bleeding out. And I had to make a decision. I was standing in my bathroom shower because, when you're bleeding to death, you don't want to mess up the pretty carpet, right? So I had retreated to my shower so I wouldn't make a mess of my beautiful home. And I remember standing in that shower thinking, you know what? You've been asking God, heal me or let me die. You got your out. You got your way out right here. Just stand in this shower, sit down on the ground. This won't be long, because I was already getting a little lightheaded and woozy. And I don't mean to gross y'all out, but the amount of blood in the human body is pretty shocking. And I lost a lot of it. I had a friend taking care of me, and she would come in the bathroom from time to time. This was all in a period of 20 minutes. She would come into the bathroom and she'd gasp. And she'd say, I've taken care of a lot of people, Rosemary. I didn't know the human body had this much blood in it. So, but at one point in that bathroom, I thought, you've been thinking about ending your life. You got your ticket out, babe. Do it. Just do it. And I thought about it and I thought, you know what? There have been a lot of people put a lot of effort into saving me. And I think that I need to just go forward and get an ambulance. So I did. Took me to a little ER. The ER was not attached to a hospital. It was a standalone ER.
I hate those.
They made a few more boo-boos.
I don't understand why those are a thing. I really don't.
Oh, never again, man. You see an ambulance taking you to an ER that is not affiliated with the hospital.
That's a horrible
you
ER.
tap
I mean,
somebody.
a horrible ambulance. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, you tap that driver or the attendant on the shoulder and say, "I'm not going there. Keep going." But in that ER, it was a doctor and a RN, and the doctor seemed. I mean, honestly, I looked in her eyes and I saw fear, and I thought that's not a good thing to see in her eyes.
No.
And yet, they packed me with gauze like a Christmas goose and left the room and left me there with my buddy who was watching the blood pressure monitor. And I don't know what the plan was, but before they left, I was pretty scared. It's been a long day. The day started with an early morning surgery. And I asked the RN that was attending me there. She was to my left. I was on a gurney in this little ER. And I said, promise me you're not going to let me die. And she said, oh, honey, we have many solutions for this. She was very calming, very good, very comforting. She said, we're not going to let you die. Okay. So then they gave me a shot of Dilaudid, which is a morphine derivative. And it turns out if you have plunging blood pressure, it's a really bad idea to give somebody morphine. And that morphine, I don't know. Of course, nobody will ever talk about this, but I had lost a tremendous amount of blood at this point. So they give me morphine or Dilaudid through an IV. And that thing went right to my heart. And my heart goes, what? No. But yeah, I wasn't long after that. And I lost consciousness as soon as that IV went into my system. I did. And so you had asked when we started about the big event. I very close to my last words on this earth were, those are some good drugs.
Wow.
And then I passed out.
No, I
left the room.
Yeah, when I started this show, like I said, I told you it was like you don't just the fact how you are now to me is the amazing part is how you came out of this the way you have, because I wouldn't even know how to empathize, sympathize, just whatever with somebody with the same, because it's just the story, just the emotion. It's like, where do you begin to even comfort somebody on this level? I mean, just the fact, that's why I said I'm blown away with where you're at after all this, because I couldn't even say where I would be in that situation.
I'm in a unique situation, kind of the same way. I'm a person that says everything happens for a reason. I try to stick to that. I met a girl back in, I don't remember, high school. She took me to church. I've never been to church in a long time. Our youth group was really unique because 90% of us, probably 8 of us, lost our father. So it was crazy. My father was still alive until when I was in the youth group. Long story short, malpractice. So I lost him, and I went through what you're going through, loss of a loved one. And then a couple months later, 2 of my friends lost their dad in a motorcycle accident. I told them at the funeral, I said, a lot of people are going to come up to you and say, I know how you're feeling. I'm sorry. Just let it go. Because I truly know how you're feeling, and you don't know. You truly don't know what to feel because we were young. I mean, I was 15. They were probably like 12 and 13. So you just got to let it. People just say stuff just to say it. It's a common thing to say. I'm sorry, it'll get better. It won't, And I asked my youth pastor the same thing. I said, that's why he loved me being there. I played devil's advocate. And I said, so how can my father, who was just a simple man working to provide for the family, die, but criminals walk the streets? He goes, like, honestly, I have no idea. And I was like, I understand. But I can't get over that. Like it makes no sense. But
no, like I said, I'm thankful that you put your story down, because it's one of those things. I really enjoy this. I mean, because we're to this point, getting back to things. So now here you are. You're in this in this thing. I mean, you're all drugged up. Your heart's starting to freak out, and now it's like, here we go. Continue on. I mean, it's like, and go.
Well, in retrospect, giving me that Dilaudid was not a good plan. It turns out they made multiple mistakes. I had fallen asleep, which was a mercy. I was exhausted. I was still coming down from the propofol. That's the procedure they did at the hospital to take the flesh or take whatever for the biopsy. That took 30 minutes. They told me it took more than 3 hours to awaken me. I am very sensitive to pharmaceuticals of every kind. So I was still kind of floating around on that. And then they give me a shot of Dilaudid to somebody who's got blood pressure that's dropping. These were not good choices they made. And what they should have done is when I showed up at that ER, they should have turned me away and said, look, she needs a trauma center. Get her out of here.
Yeah.
Go. And I've since learned that a gynecological bleed, as it's called, is considered a life-threatening emergency, as it should be. It turns out they were right. And I mentioned earlier what inspired me to put this on paper. I was giving this talk, I guess it was about a year and a half later, I'm not sure. And one of the things that happened right after my husband's suicide, I guess, I don't know, 2 days after, I lost the ability to even drink water. And everyone knew that I just had seized up. I was in shock was the real issue. I was in shock. And when you go into shock, your body just says, we're done. I got nothing, So I was not able to even sip water. It wouldn't go down. It was very strange. And so my daughter hauled me off to a now care facility, and we go back into the waiting or the exam room, and I hop up on the little examining table, and the doctors come in, or the doctor comes in, and he's my age, 50 something, nice looking fellow. And he has my chart, which is very thin because I stay away from doctors as best I can, even then. And he's very jolly. And he says, so ladies, what's the problem here? And my daughter says, well, my mom's husband killed himself 2 days ago, and she is unable to even drink liquids. She needs to be able to drink water, at least something. And the doctor, who had presented as a fairly professional, mature fellow, he literally, with that chart in his hands, he literally went, oh, and he said, oh my God, same thing happened to my Aunt Bertha's husband, and she was never right in the head again.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Oh,
dude.
my God.
And my daughter, who was, I think, 28 at the time, I was very proud of her. She's just, just a cute little kid. Well, she's 28. But she turns to him and she says, that is not helpful, doctor. Are you going to help my mother or not? And he was very, and he was, he got shook up. I mean, he immediately just snapped back to it. And he said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to prescribe 60 Valium immediately. And she needs to get in to see a psychiatrist and give her better drugs for this. But the Valium will enable her to calm down a little bit, take a little bit of the edge off, and hopefully she'll be able to start eating and drinking again, blah, 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 blah. So when I shared that story at this talk I gave, and did questions and answers afterwards, that's when a woman stood up afterwards and said, you really need to write this down. I said, I will not be writing this as a book. I will share it as a story, but I don't feel that this is a book. I feel this is a story. And she said, no, we know a lot more about mental illness, but we don't know how to deal with trauma at this level. And she said, your book will help others understand, because here I had been a successful writer. My husband had been a successful professional. And I went from that to living out of my car in 30 days. So we really don't know how to manage trauma. And that's what inspired me to do it. And as I wrote the book, it was actually very healing for me to remember the experience, to think about the experience. So back to my very last words almost being, that's some really good stuff. The last thing I remember was just falling asleep. I don't even remember falling asleep. I just remember feeling, oh, I'm really tired. And then my friend who was sitting because the doctor and the nurse walked out of the room. My friend stayed by my bedside, and he said, he looked over at the blood pressure monitor and it said 32/25, which is all but dead. You usually don't come back from that. And he said, he was like, oh, something's gone terribly awry. What do I do? And as he stood up, he said, your eyes popped open. And he said, you try to sit up on the bed, like sit up, from waist down, sit up. And he said, you couldn't quite manage it. So you put your shoulders up and your head up. And he said, you reached up to heaven and you looked up. And he said, you actually extended your arms up and you wiggled your fingers. And he said, you talked to somebody that only you could see. And there's actually a term for that I've learned since. It's called terminal lucidity. And often at the very end of life, there's a surge of energy, where people sit up, they speak, they do things that belie their current physical state. But then after that, I plopped back down. And he said, and then the blood pressure went to error, which meant it was lower. 32/25. I do not have a memory of that waking up business. Meanwhile, what I remember was that I awakened from what seemed like a deep, dreamless state, being catapulted out of my body. And I mean catapulted. And I haven't heard anyone else describe it that way. And I had this impression that there was a sinewy, silvery cord from the crown of my head to the bottom of my feet. And it was though somebody had pulled back like an archer's bow and released. And when that snap hit my back, my whole backside, I just went flying out of this body. And I guess I'm maybe a little disappointed that I didn't see my body, but I was floating away in this perfect blackness. And it was silky and smooth and velvety and comforting. And it was an active atmosphere. It wasn't just, oh, I'm in blackness. It was like spiritually massaging me or something. And it was so invigorating and comforting and reassuring. I mean, my mama has been dead 20 years, and it was like your mother's hug. It was just like everything that's lovely and holy and good in the world. So I'm floating away, and the first words out of my mouth in this new experience were, my heart has stopped. And I thought, how do I know that? I thought, I don't know how I know that, but I know that's right. And then my next thought was, I'm dying. And then being a longtime writer and editor, I immediately corrected myself and said, actually, you're not dying, you're dead. And it cracked me up because I thought, here I am going on to my reward and I am correcting my tense. And what was so cool about this to me was, we all wonder what happens to our consciousness, our intellect. And in that moment that I said that and I heard myself laugh, I had so many thoughts at once, but one of them was, everything I am has come with me. Every single thing. My goofball sense of humor, my moribund sense of humor, my silly little giggle. And I thought, I don't have breath sounds. Pretty sure I left the lungs back on the table there. I don't think I have vocal cords, and yet I am producing sound. And I believed myself to be talking out loud. As the mother of an elderly Sheltie, I talked to her, and I had talked to her an awful lot. And that's what I was doing. I was talking out loud. And people say, oh, you were probably communicating with yourself internally in your head. Nope, nope, nope. I was talking out loud. I heard it. I heard my giggle. And I thought I was pretty darn funny. And I also thought it was wonderful, absolutely wonderful, that my giggle had come with me and my sense of humor and my intellect. And I had so many memories of everything. I thought, one of my very first thoughts in this experience was, I thought I got away clean. I had been planning to off myself. I mean, I had been struggling with nothing but sheer willpower not to end my own life. And the only thing that kept me from doing it was I didn't want to do to my children what we'd already been through. But, human will can only take you so far. So I was so grateful. It was over. It was over, and my kids would say, oh, this was a terrible medical mistake. And I had all these thoughts. And I also thought, don't need to worry about that chemo and radiation now, do I? And I really thought, yay, this is not going to be a problem for me anymore. And all my life, I've endeavored, at times I've not done as well as others, to keep a daily gratitude list. I write down 5 things every morning for which I'm grateful. And in this experience, I kept saying, I'm so grateful I'm dead. I'm so grateful it's over. I'm so grateful I'm moving on. I'm so grateful this is over. And people have asked me this, how can you really be grateful for being dead? Because you're not dead. It literally was slipping from here to there. And it was so fast. I've heard the Hollywood stereotypes of, go down a long, dark tunnel and hear chimes and there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Statistically, that represents only, less than 20% of actual NDEs. NDEs, I've since learned, are as varied and customized as the people who have them. I did not have a tunnel. I just popped out of my body and floating away towards something. And you know what? I'm one of those type A, when somebody's driving me around, you need to be in the left lane. Can you go faster? Look, it's a green light. You should speed up. And here I am floating. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know why I'm floating. I don't know what's happening. I'm like, this is great. This is so cool. This is so fun. And there was so much peace, just so much peace. And when I remembered the events of my husband's suicide, and I remembered stuff, I just remembered it. It was detached. It was, oh, here's a thing that happened, but it didn't hurt. It didn't sting anymore. And it was like, it really was like I had truly, and I don't mean to diminish anyone's suffering on this earth, but one, dying was like waking up from a very intense dream. It really was. And secondly, it was like that whole 59 years had been over, was just a blink of an eye. It was just a second. And the other thing was, it was just so immediate. I'd been there and now I'm here, and it was so fast. And I had always believed that life goes on. I mean, I'd always believed that. And I thought, now I have proof. Now I know. I've always wondered, you always wonder I'd always wondered what's going to take me out. And I thought about that too. I thought my whole life, I wondered what's going to take me out. Get hit by a bus, safe falling out of the second floor window. What's going to take me out? I thought, all my life, I've relied on spiritual healing. And I think my third visit to a doctor, and they kill me. And I thought that was darn funny too. She dies from a medical mistake and she doesn't trust. Well, it wasn't a matter of trust. I just doctors, blah, blah, blah. So I had so many thoughts, and it was like my whole life I had lived with a 60 amp breaker box, for intellect, and I had just been ramped up to 100,000 amps. I had so many thoughts at once coming in so many different directions, so many things happening, so much understanding. And one of the very early things that happened, I'm still floating away from my body in this perfect blackness. One of the things I thought about very clearly, I thought, everything I am has come with me, has made that transition. Every single thing. I thought, what did I leave behind on that gurney? And I thought, worry, fear, PTSD, trauma, stress, anxiety, everything that is negative about me had remained. And it really was just like shedding, like the caterpillar shedding the chrysalis. It was like I had walked off stage and I was no longer playing this part. It felt that detached from me. And, somebody asked me, actually, it was my daughter asked me if I could sum up the whole thing in 3 words, what would it be? And it would be, one, in this experience, I felt the presence of all these beings, angels, who knew me and loved me. I have always been so hard on myself. I've always been a chronic, classic overachiever. And yet in this experience, they were like, she's home. She's back. And they were so happy to be with me. And I don't know any time in my life I've walked into a place that people are that happy to see me. But to sum it up in 3 words, it would be, welcome home, dear. You've been away a while. Welcome home. And it was just so comforting. I'm a smart cookie. I've always been a little bit different from everybody, like way too different. I've never made friends easily, but these were my people. So early on, one of the experiences, and sometimes it feels like it just all happened in a circle continuum. It wasn't like a linear chronology, first this and then this, this. But I felt the presence of this massive spiritual being to my left, slightly behind me, and way bigger than me. And I'm still in this blackness and still floating, but I recognize that this person, this being is there. And I turn my head to the left and look up, and I think, I'm turning my head to the left. My body's on that gurney, but I'm turning something. So I knew I had a human-esque form. And I said with a lilt in my voice, I said, and who are you? And the answer was immediate. The answer was, you, Rosemary. You are the image and likeness. I'm the original. And I was like, whoa. And it came with an infusion of knowledge. And I recognized it as Genesis 1:26 and 27, which I'd spent a lifetime trying to wrap my mind around. And that was what was given me. Genesis 1:26, 27, my favorite Bible verse, made in the image and likeness of God. And this went on and on and on and on and on. As we talk about, my book, I think is 270 pages, so I'm not going to share it all in the next few minutes. But ultimately, I don't remember the transition. One minute I'm floating away from my body. The next thing I'm in a white room, and I'm on my feet now, and I'm standing. And I wish I'd looked down at my feet to see what they look like. I wish I'd looked to see what I was wearing.
Yeah.
In that hospital, I was in a gown, the hospital gown that's so impressive. But I didn't, but I knew I was on feet or something approximating feet. And I remember so clearly thinking, I don't know if I have feet or legs, but in this white room, I saw a door ahead of me, maybe, 15, 20 feet, some distance in front of me. And I thought, I know that if I have an intention to get to that door, I will move to that door. And sure enough, I tell people I perambulated toward that door. And having read about NDEs my entire life, I had read pretty much every book I could ever get my hands on since Raymond Moody's book came out in 1976. I remember thinking, I know what that door is. That door is when you don't have a chance to come back. That door is the line of demarcation, crossing the Rubicon. I couldn't wait to get to that door. And I felt the presence of angels and beings with me. And I was like, out of my way. I see the door. We're doing the door. Everybody step aside. Wow. No questions. I don't want to go back. Move. And in that white room, one of the things, it was white. And there was a very light mist falling. And the room didn't have a ceiling. Not the, they had white. It had white on the bottom, white walls, and then the door in front of me was shut. And I remember being a little puzzled by a shut door. You know the song "Going Home, Going Home, I'm Going Home" talks about moving through an open door,
Mm-hmm.
and I I wanted to just be there to get there, but on the way, walking toward this door, I looked at this mist, and it wasn't just falling, it was like dancing around me and moving around me. And I wanted to focus on an individual droplet of this mist, which I know sounds just crazy, but I felt like I ought to be able to do that. And so I asked the being that was with me, I said, um, why can't I focus on an individual droplet? And the being said, your spiritual eyes have not acclimated to this new environment, but those are particles of light. That when we go to heaven, some people think they die from a disease process and it's so imprinted on their soul that they think it's part of their identity, whether it's mental illness, physical illness, whatever it may be. And they said, you are cleansed. Your innate spiritual wholeness is restored before you go to heaven. And I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. Good to know. Out of my way, I'm doing the door. And I got to that door.
I ain't got time for you, Angel. I'm going to the door.
Get me out of here. But I got to that door and I paused. Ugh. I paused and I asked, is this the divine will for my life? And the answer was no. And I was like, But the answer was, but whatever you decide, go forward, go back, whatever you decide, you go evolve God's blessings and mercy and grace and love. I said, all right, I'll do the door. And I was told in that context, there are no wrong decisions. And obviously in life, there are wrong decisions. But I think if we are striving to know what is the right thing to do, asking God what is the right thing to do, I do believe even if we make a wrong choice, we're going to circle back around and make the right choice. So I said, that's good to know. I'm doing the door. And that's when I had a very, 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 very powerful vision of that nurse who had promised me she wasn't going to let me die. And she was now sitting in a hospital supply room on a little metal stool, leaning forward, hands in her head, sobbing uncontrollably, saying, and I'm in this vision. The thing is, it wasn't a vision. I was now like in another, that sounds weird, but I was in another dimension watching this experience, like a silent observer in the room. And she was sitting on a little metal stool, leaning forward, head in her hands. And she said, I promised that woman I wasn't going to let her die, and I lost her. And I was like, oh man, you know what? She's an RN. She's seen this happen before. She'll get over it. But then I felt her pain. It really hit me right in the center of my chest or whatever I had there. And I recognized that grief as the agonal grief I had known from my own husband's suicide. And I had the thought, if I can spare one human being that much agony, I have to go back. And I had my right hand up to push through the door, and I went to put it down. And in this mix, in this exchange, I mean, it all happened so condensed. But I was told if I did agree to go back, I would be healed. And they didn't say you're going to be healed of this, and this is going to happen, and this good thing will happen, this good. They said, you'll be restored to wholeness, because I'd been through the white room. I said, that's good to know, out of my way. But after seeing that nurse's suffering, I put my right hand down by my side, which I'd had up to move through the door. And I thought, hey, that's pretty cool. Right-handed on earth, right-handed in heaven. And as soon as my hand went down, I was back on that gurney. Now, the PS to this, then I was revived. My understanding is with some electricity. You know, it's really fascinating. I was gone more than 10 minutes. And when you bleed to death, which is what had caused my death, well, actually my heart stopping, they cannot do CPR because with every compression of the chest, they push out more blood. So the belief is after 5 to 6 minutes without oxygenation, the brain is irrevocably damaged. And that wasn't the case. But, you know, when I first was roused and I opened my eyes, that nurse was in my face and she said, what year is it? 2018. What is your name? Rosemary Thornton. Where are you? I said, a crummy excuse for an ER. But I think they realized I was really okay.
Wow.
I was transported to a trauma center.
So at that time, did you hear any audible noise when you crossed over into the other room? Did you hear any like audible noise, or it was just vision, just something you saw?
That's another good question. I didn't hear any noise per se, but throughout this experience, I heard somebody screaming the word Rosemary over and over and over again. And the more this experience progressed, the softer that voice became. And I was about 3 years into this experience. I've always wondered, why didn't I turn around and say yes? I mean, I can be in a crowded mall and I hear somebody yell, "Hey, Mom." And I go, "What? One of mine?" But I never turned around. I never responded. And I realized it's because Mom, author, Rosemary, widow was back there. I shed that persona. I literally just peeled it off and let it go. So she could have been yelling anything at me. And I have since learned that there are paramedics that when they're trying to resuscitate somebody who's for all appearances dead, I heard one story of a paramedic said, "Remember your children. Remember your children." That they realized that calling the name is not as effective. And because I had no thought of my children, which surprises me. I mean, they just didn't come to my thought. And I realize now that that's kind of God's mercy. How can you go and realize, you're leaving three, and my children are all well into adulthood, but yes. So the only sound I heard was that name screaming again and again and again, Rosemary.
Wow. Do you think it was the RN? I mean, am I just?
Oh, yeah, I learned later. My buddy told me because as soon as they came into the room, they knew I was dead. They came into the room to resuscitate me and try to resuscitate me. Because when somebody bleeds to death, they have to, as somebody explained to me, they have to refill the tank, or no, they have to plug the hole, refill the tank, and start the heart again. You can't just start the heart. You've got to get fluids in. So, but he said, you could hear that nurse throughout the entire facility screaming Rosemary over and over and over again. And I told him, I said, I think I heard it probably, if I had to guess, 35, 40 times. And he said every bit of it. So I was gone for a while.
Wow. It's because it's one of those things. It's like you have those thoughts because everybody has that. That's the eternal question. It's like, what happens to us when we die? And that's your story alone, even though, like you said, isn't going to be the same thing for everybody. It does. It shows that there's hope that it's not, you don't just get rid of everything that you've come to be as a person. You take that with you, which is fantastic. I mean, because
it's stuff. Yes.
Because when you were talking about that energy, I was wondering, because do you think that you tapped into the Akashic, record and that stuff? When you said you just felt like that flood, like there was a lot of stuff there. I've always wondered that because I think you said it's like pumped into like your consciousness. You just felt this, this wave come in. I wonder if that's that one where you tap into that other area and like you actually felt that where you become one with you, with the universe with the passing on.
I did feel like an analogy I've given is that I was like one millionth of a drop of ocean being reunited with the ocean. And there was so much familiarity. There's a Bible verse, I think it's St. John said, "I will bring all things to your remembrance." That's what it felt like. It was a memory that I had always had and always known and had forgotten. And it's like being reminded. But that thing of being around the beings who just were like, she's back. She's here. That was so beautiful. So beautiful. Wow. And the PS to this is I came back. I was taken. This time I got a real ambulance ride. They went really fast. And and I had an oxygen mask on. And in the ambulance ride, I know our time is short, but for the ambulance ride, there was an angel in the ambulance with me. And she kept telling me funny stories and funny jokes. And I remember I kept taking the oxygen mask off so I could laugh because I kept saying, "You are a Stitch. You are so funny." And it's like, even on the ambulance ride, they wanted me to be calm and comfortable. And I remember the attendant in the back of that ambulance, more than once, he came up and he snapped that oxygen mask back on me. And he said, "You've got to keep that thing on." And, my friend who saw me taken out to the ambulance, he said, "You've heard the expression white as a sheet." He said, "You looked more dead than alive when they wheeled you out." And he said, "Your skin was white." And he said, "Your lips were blue and under your eyes were blue." He said, he had been a medic in the Vietnam War. He said, "You looked more dead than alive at that point." And I think the ambulance drivers, I think the people at that little ER were pretty convinced that while they'd gotten me back, I wasn't long for this world. And I think the ambulance drivers, and God bless them, I don't blame them, don't die on us. Let me get you to the trauma center before we do this again. Oh, and the PS of this is, it took some tests and took some time, but when I came back, the grief was gone. The grief was just gone. The anxiety, the self-hatred, the self-contempt, the self-loathing, the guilt, all of it was gone. And it did take some tests, but ultimately it was revealed that all the cancer was gone. As the doctor told me later, there was not a single cell of cancer in you, not one cell. In fact, what she told my friend, her flesh is so pink and pretty and perfect, I wouldn't believe she even had cancer were it not for the multiple medical tests. So I had a complete dramatic healing of cancer.
One of the questions that we had just pop up there is, do you remember seeing any relatives?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot. I'm a little bummed that I didn't see any of my loved ones. And, I had this blackout event between being in the blackness floating and being in the white room. I don't remember transitioning between those two spaces. And I wonder if, mom stuck her head in to say hello. I have no memory of that experience whatsoever. And so, no, I did not see any dead relatives.
And I wonder if it was the door. I wonder if that's when you do, you go through that door, and that's when, like the actual reunite, because
my mother was my soulmate. She's been gone more than 20 years. And if I had seen my mother, there would be no talking me into returning.
Yeah, it's one of those, I'm more agnostic, when it comes to, to beliefs. I believe in a creator. It's like, but I have a standing date with my mom on the Eastern Gate of Heaven. That's she's still with us, so she hasn't passed yet, but that's one of the things. It's like when she goes, and then when I go, that's the thing, is we are to meet in that location. So it's one of those, you've always seen that, the pearly gates of heaven, and did you get any sense of like that actual, that there was a physical location, like that's written about, or does it seem like that's more, metaphor for like what you experienced?
Well, that's another really good question. That's another really good question. That is a great question. As we would define such things, there was definitely a physicality to the experience. I mean, when I observed, because I was a former reporter, and I almost lost my job as a reporter on the first day when it's a long story, but I made a boo-boo and I did not observe my environments adequately. So ever since then, I'm like, look around. What's happening? What temperature is it? What does it feel like here? Who else is here? How many people have attended? So in that experience, I remember thinking it's not cold, it's not hot, it's not damp, it's not dry. It's absolutely perfect environment. I don't know. It's like it really is designed for you as to physics. So there was a physicality. I wasn't sensing any uncomfortable temperature. I remember floating. How can you float? How does a spiritual idea float? How does an ethereal being float? And then being on my feet and knowing I had legs or feet or something. But yeah, that's another great question. Should have put that one in my book.
Well, yeah, those are some of the ones I was prepping. I was just thinking about, because that's one of those things. There's always that, you're going to stand before St. Peter. We've all seen the cartoons. We've all seen the depictions. You stand there at the gate. The book is opened up, and it's just like, yeah, you going ahead. Like it's heaven's bouncer. But
I'm not sure what to think of your biblical knowledge coming from Looney Tunes, but go on.
Well, just because everybody has that picture, it's like when you die, you go before this thing, the gates are waiting right there, and you just got to pass the heaven's bouncer type thing to see if you made the naughty or nice list. But for me, I look at it, it's just, because you want that. It's like that pet that's passed on, that pet's, those beloved ones. There's always that thing as you hold on to, that when I pass, I'm going to meet, these loved ones that have gone. I'm going to see, I'm going to see that dog that I absolutely loved. It's going to be sitting there, tail wagging, favorite toy, waiting for me to go. And I think that's one of the things, like, from people, like when they hear your stories and they read this, like when, they need to go get your book, read this thing. And so that way, when they get these things, it kind of gives you hope that, yes, there is something there, that's not just that when the switch goes, it's nothing. I mean, because it's not just a void. There's something on the other side.
Oh, there is more substance in that experience than there is in this. There is so much more substance, so much more reality, so much love and peace and love. Oh my gosh, it's so much more real. It really was akin to waking up from a very intense dream.
Yeah, wow, man.
I'm lost for words.
This has been an hour pack thing of just, it's like, wow, I would look down at the time. I'm like, I can't believe we've already gone through an hour. It's this thing. But yeah, I think for a lot of people, and one person just posed it, that blacked area, do you feel that that might have been, in a way, kind of like what's known as purgatory?
I think I don't think so. I think it's better described as a vestibule, kind of the transition place. But thinking about this, where did I go?
Mhm.
We haven't figured out how to do light travel yet. Like, Gene Roddenberry, he was always my hero. My mother wanted me, creator of Star Trek. My mother
Mhm.
always wanted me to marry Gene Roddenberry, and then my name would be Rosemary Roddenberry. And she loved Star Trek too. But their warp speed, the universe was warped, and then the spaceship would travel through the warp. So that's how they did light speed.
Mhm.
I think when we die, we're going somewhere far away. I don't know, but I don't know. I don't know the math of it, but I know it was just literally like going from here to the kitchen. And it wasn't that far,
Well,
but it happened so fast.
the way you said the Star Trek, that made me think, like, in the scenes, like when they go, as soon as they engage, you see the star thing go, and it's just like, I was thinking about your description of the cord being pulled and then
Yes.
snap. It has that same, it's like you feel the buildup, and then it's just that instantaneous, like, you're gone. Like that was the
Yes.
start, that was the jump point. And that's really cool.
It was profound, and a lot more happened, and ultimately it was discovered that, there was no cancer present, but other things were healed too. I had suffered mainly the grief. The grief had been so profound, and I had been just so full of self-recrimination for everything. And I stopped reviewing every single thing I ever said to him. I stopped looking back at every mistake I had made, and I was able to let it go. And it was like the grief was moved from being all-consuming to move to, I miss him. I don't hate him. It's not that I can't live without him. I just miss him. So it became a very different kind of grief. And I still had a lot of things to work out. I still get anxious. My beloved 13-year-old Sheltie died a couple years after that, and that was a hard thing to go through. And I had a dream about her that was so realistic. I know she's okay. And whoever says dogs don't have souls has never been in love with a dog.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I think it's one of those, it's the thing that is so painful about a dog's passing is they give you a lifetime's worth of love and affection in this short, tiny span. And it's, we've got one, he's going to be 12, so it's just a matter of time. And it's just, it's going to be devastating.
Oh, it is. And in my book, I have a chapter devoted to Teddy, my dog. I love that dog. And Teddy and I went through a lot together. I mean, she lost her mind too. She went through a lot of sicknesses. She went from being a very healthy dog. She saw him do this. She went from being a very healthy dog to having an awful lot of problems, physical problems. I think it was $5,000 in veterinary bills that first year just to keep her alive. I mean, she couldn't manage losing him, and that's what I told my children too. It's not just they lost their stepfather; they lost their mom too.
Yeah.
That is so crazy that some people think that animals don't have souls, because I briefly worked in the funeral home business for a while, and there's some animals, most dogs will lay by your bed as you die through hospice, and they don't want to leave. Like the other owner has to try to make them go in a room so we can pick up the person, and then they just howl. They give off the craziest howls, like they just know their owner is gone, and
Poor
people just like,
things.
oh no, that's just a dumb dog. No,
Well,
dogs are
dogs can see. I believe dogs and cats can see. There's so many stories. And even my dog, I had a dog before Teddy was named Daisy. I remember one night Daisy saw somebody walk across the room. And I said, Daisy, what are you seeing? And I felt it. I felt that there was somebody who just walked, and they walked in, they said goodbye to me, and Teddy or Daisy watched them too. Well, the next morning, this was years and years and years ago, but the next morning I found out my father's second wife had passed on in the night. So yes, dogs see that. When you see a dog watching something or barking at a corner, you need to pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They're seeing something you don't see.
Now, one of those, like, the question, do you think that experience was meant to help you get past, and kind of help get over, the severe grief you're going through?
I do. There's a Bible verse from Psalms, behold, if I make my bed in hell, thou art there. I hadn't just made my bed in hell. I had set up housekeeping. I had just decided my life would be hell for the rest of my life. And this was not my fault. I mean, it took me a long time to figure out when somebody kills themselves, there is nothing you can do to have caused it. And there's nothing you could have done to stop it. And maybe there's an exception to that rule, but I seriously doubt it. And people talk about suicide prevention, which is one of my rants. I get a lot of ugly email about this. Suicide prevention, in my opinion, is largely BS. It's something we do to make ourselves feel better. But when you're talking to a suicide widow or somebody who's lost a child to suicide, it hurts. Suicide prevention is saying there's something more you could have done. If you want to look at how to how to start inroads towards solving the problem of suicide, people who have lost a child or a spouse to suicide are 12 to 48 times more likely to end their own life. So there we have a risk group. And what do we do to suicide survivors? We isolate them. They become societal lepers. We put them off to the side. Stay away from me. My husband was successful. I had this little book deal. We were the couple. And you know what? Those people that came to our parties, that came to our fancy parties, not one. Well, there was one that endured, and she happened to be somebody that I met in an ancillary way. Those people just went bye-bye. They just disappeared. And you know who came into the fray? Were the people that maybe society would define as working class, middle class. Those are the people who came into the fray and scooped me up and said, I'm not going to let you die. You may be falling. You may be so far down in the pit that you can't even imagine a way to get out. But I'm going to hold the rope and I'm going to talk to you and I'm going to keep pulling and I'm not going to let you die. And there were so many people that showed up and pretty much said that he did what he did, but he's not taking you with him. And so suicide prevention does make me angry because we need to pay attention to the people who've lost somebody to suicide because that is a known risk group.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that point, but I'm blown away with your story. It's one of the, there's one, like we could just, pick, it's like, you definitely, there's we'll just go Joe Rogan here. Have you thought about the DMT experience, type thing? Because DMT basically it's a way of experiencing, the other side without, going through the physical, death like you did. There's one, it's basically, it's a psychedelic thing on steroids. It's like you take it and it basically allows you to basically transcend, the current consciousness and go into that next realm. A lot of people describe like the near-death experience type stories after taking this. Because
somebody told me if I took psychedelic mushrooms, I could visit heaven without having to leave my body.
Yeah, that's basically it. It's like you sit there and you can, yeah, and basically it's that what So it's I don't know if anybody's ever mentioned that to you. It's because you've asked the questions, but I mean it's just as I was going through here, it definitely gives hope, for those that that they're looking forward to seeing their loved ones that. And that's one of the biggest things is just that I really take away from this is about you talking about that once you get to the other side, that there's a calming thing that you don't have this, the fear and all that stuff goes away, and I think about too, it's like with the other paranormal aspects is, like you had your choice. I wonder if some of those people, it's just because there's, like you said, there's no wrong choice. But I wonder if some of them make that decision like they're not ready to go yet and they want to hang around. And then that's why you have like the little old lady or the old man that doesn't want to let go of their house and they wanted to stay there, and keep going, keep hanging out with the house, like your hauntings. And that's why I've wondered if that's what that's about. They're just not ready to move on yet.
I don't know. One of the things that happened, I hear people say after they come back from this, they feel like they're 50% in this world and 50% in that world. I did not feel that way. I felt like I was solidly 95% in that world and barely in this one, maybe 5%. And after I came back and, I'm put in a hospital room and now I'm getting attention. Now they're paying attention to what I tell them. When I had a couple friends that would kind of tag team while I'm in that hospital bed, because I was still a little, I'd been completely drained of blood, I was a little off my game. But when my friends would step out of the hospital room for a minute to go tend to whatever, the angels would appear at my bedside, around my hospital bed, at the foot of the bed, and at the sides of the bed. I mean, just legions of angels, and they would sing to me. And they sang me the most beautiful hymns, the most beautiful songs. Their songs glorified God. And the more they sang, the more sparkly they got. And the more sparkly they got, the more they sang. And it was so incredible. And I told them, I said, I am really good with houses. I'm really good with architecture, but melody and lyrics, I'm very, very frightened or concerned that I won't be able to remember this. I want to remember it for eternity. And they told me, they were very specific. They said, this singing, this is for your peace, your joy, and your healing. And they said, and this is a thank you for agreeing to come back. And that really got to me, because it's what you were saying about people deciding not to go. Every NDE I've ever met, I have never, because, now my friends have all been dead. We're a lot of fun at, cocktail parties. How'd you die? Aortic aneurysm, pneumonia, heart attack. I bled to death. We were having this talk one time at a restaurant, and we're all seated around talking about how we die. And you look up and the waitress is just,
yeah. Yeah. That's when you realize the lady from Applebee's is just like, I'm going to come back.
But I have never met an NDE, and, I haven't met all of them, but I've never met one that says, yeah, I insisted on coming back. No, when you were in that experience, and, the other interesting thing, a lot of times people, the thing they die from becomes the thing they deal with later. It becomes a health issue. In my case, it's more in the book and more to the story, but I had multiple problems that when I died, I had arthritis in my wrist. I had high frequency hearing loss. I had a busted up knee. When I came back, that stuff was healed, and permanently. I came back like a reset. As my friend in IT says, you got rebooted by the creator, which is true. So I had no lingering health effects. It's funny. They, after I came back, the next morning, the doctor comes in and sits down at my bedside. And now I've got I shouldn't say real doctor. That's not fair. But now I've got the older doctor who visits me at my bedside in the hospital. And he goes, well, you had a heart attack. He said, that's actually what happened. Your heart stopped. And I asked, well, wait a second. What about the blood thing? He said, well, you lost so much blood, your heart went into VFib, which is where it just kind of quivers. And he said, and then it stopped. And I said, well, how do you know that? He said, well, we do the blood work, and your blood, what do they call it? The blood enzymes. The enzymes in your blood were way elevated. He said, but so we know you've had a heart attack. There's probably significant damage to your heart. And I said, no, don't worry about that. I said, the angel said if I agreed to come back, I'd be fine. Well, they took my little gurney bed down to the heart lab and did an echocardiogram. And the whole time I'm going, it's okay. We don't need to do this. I'm fine. And sure enough, and so many tests were like this. There was when you bleed to death, that's hard on a body. And I've also learned subsequently, when you bleed out, which is what happened to me, I lost so much blood, your body shuts off blood flow to the extremities, saying, we have an emergency. Keep the core going at all costs. And then it gets to a point where it's just your lungs, heart, and brain is all that's online, and it's kept going. When you get to a point that you're so out of blood that your heart stops, what happens is all the little veins and capillaries get sticky. It's clotting. Your body's saying, we got an emergency. Coming back from that, I remember one of the things they told me in the hospital is we have to worry now about clots. You might have multiple blood clots. The point of the story is there were many, many, many severe prognostications, none of which unfolded. My heart was fine. Internal organs were fine. No peripheral nerve damage. I came back better than I left.
So you basically, and this is, I wasn't with the book, how have they written, a medical story on you? Because this is like one of those things like in the medical journal where this is like, this shouldn't have occurred. This is everything, we bring all the information. It's like, she was dead on the table. And like I said, what you described.
It's so fun. I miss giving live talks. When I gave live talks, it was so cool. When I tell the story that I told the nurse in the hospital that I was bleeding excessively, I see the medical professionals in the crowd. They go, and then I say, and then I get to that part about they give me Dilaudid, even though my blood pressure is already starting to, ratchet down. And I say, and then they give me a shot of Dilaudid, and then the medical professionals go. So there were a lot of mistakes made. So my point is, a lot of people also ask me, am I going to sue? I chose not to sue. Nobody did this on purpose. They all did their best. It's an awfully stressful thing. Iatrogenic diseases are the number 3 cause of death in this country. I think it's heart attack, cancer, and hospitals. That's what kills you. Everyone did their best. But the downside to this is I have every confidence, nobody's going to be talking much about this. There was a lot of concern about how many mistakes were made. And, the other thing, I did talk to a buddy about this, and he said, what are your damages? There's no damage. I have no lingering health effects. I came back better than I left. What am I going to sue for?
Yeah, I mean, that's where the absolute miracle is. I mean, this way, not only would it be a case study for future doctors, this is what not to do. By the way, when your patient says, I feel like I'm bleeding out, you might want to check. It's like
the hospital did change their policy, which is pretty cool. I had a friend of mine that went in for a biopsy, and same hospital, and he said after the biopsy, it was a needle biopsy, very simple thing. And after the biopsy, he got dressed, he was getting ready to go home, and the nurse said, "No, we've had a policy change. After subsequent to any biopsy, you have to go sit over there, and a nurse will watch you for 3 hours." And he looked at me and he said, I've had so many biopsies in that hospital, but after Rosemary, he said they've changed their policy. So the hospital did take it seriously. They sent me a letter that said, what did you think of your experience at blah, blah, general? And I said, other than the fact that you killed me dead, it was swell.
Yeah. It's now the Rosemary doctrine. It's passed around the hospitals.
That's the thing, I mean,
I like it.
I had no idea until I went to school that when you internally bleed, especially in the pelvic and stomach area, there's enough space in there that it can take all of your blood and some of your buddies. When I found that out, I'm like, that's pretty fucking serious. And like, when you said you bled out, I'm like, yeah, she lost everything. Like, it's just, there's so much space in that area that it's insane.
Well, and the fact that I turned white, and that my lips were blue and under my eyes were blue, it's this is kind of gross, but also fascinating. My buddy who came into the hospital the next morning to check on me, just a handful of inches below my knee, he said, your feet, that part of your body was dark, 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 dark blue, almost appeared black. And it took about 16 hours for color to return. And the problem was I still just didn't have enough fluid. My body just could not get blood into my long legs. And so the fact that I had 16 hours without blood flow to my legs and have no subsequent peripheral damage to my nerves is quite remarkable.
That's where like where I was wondering about the medical thing is that seems like that is something where, you're going to have people from all over the place wanting to, it's like, hey, would you mind if we run some tests? Because there is no way this should have occurred. That's, we need to run some.
Oh God, dude, I don't know. Like with the whole Vladen thing, I went to basic EMT school. The last part of it was clinicals, running scenarios, and my instructor was like, "Hey, this guy's having heart problems." Long story short, my buddy straight shot like what do you call it? The medicine that helped for chest pain. I said, "No, don't do that yet." Why not? Shot it. It immediately dropped to 60. And I was like, "We don't know his blood pressure." And when you said that, I was like, they have machines that literally says the blood pressure. It says it was bad. They still gave you a blood pressure drop medicine, which is fucking crazy in the hospital. I don't know.
That was not a smart move. And you know what they put in my chart, which I think folks knew this was a boo-boo. They wrote in my chart that I had an allergic reaction to Dilaudid. When your tank's down below E and they put some Dilaudid in intravenously, I think everybody's heart's going to go, what?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, can we go beyond this wasn't a rash? I mean, I said this was not an allergic reaction to a drug.
Close, man.
She didn't break out in hives. Her heart stopped.
I know. Oh, the other funny, this is kind of funny now. I'm not a big fan of health insurance. I don't like the way they play. My bill at that little ER, that little standalone ER, was $7,995. And my health insurance refused to pay it on the basis that it was a non-emergent event and could have been handled at a lesser priority medical facility. And I was like, how do you get above having your heart stop and having to get the electricity? How do you get beyond that? And I disputed the claim and they paid it because I wrote a pretty not angry, but a pretty clear letter that what's worse than that?
I'm just
You tell me what's
I'm
worse
just
than
going.
that. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't
I'm
know.
like, because I'm thinking like, okay, you guys just about killed her. You did all these mistakes, and you have the balls to bill the patient. That's when he. That's when he just go, hey, guess what, Rosemary? I just want to let you know we're glad you're okay. Hey, that was free. We covered all of it. Don't worry about it. Not
My
like
father was the same way. Long story, malpractice. Long story short, killed my father. It was a complete accident. Whatever. They still billed us. I'm like, you killed my family member, and you still want to bill us? What balls do you guys have? You should have been like, no, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
No.
Really?
That's on us.
$7,995. And then the insurance company denied it.
I don't know. I understand like it's a business and whatnot, but like $14,000 for a funeral to put someone back together, and it's a funeral. I know it's a business. People need to make money, but it needs to be free. Something. It's cost so much to have a funeral, even a cremation. It's unfair.
I was in shock. That funeral business, I'm still pretty angry about. They billed me over $14,000, and the lion's share of it because I had him cremated. He wasn't buried. That was putting his face back together. $14,000, and somebody should have said in that funeral home. They should have said he's not restorable. Why don't we just do the closed casket? And it was in a rented casket because I was so worried about money. But then I got the $14,000 bill, and what do? I did leave them a negative Google review, which feels creepy and weird. But seriously, they were taking advantage of me. I am disgusted and disappointed by their behavior, but I didn't know where I was in the world. And that was despicable what they did. And then ultimately, there was a private viewing where I went and saw what was done. And it was not pretty. They did not do a good job.
Now, that would have been the people I would have sued because that is like ridiculous. They know, you're going to cremate him because they know they deal with these situations all the time. They know they couldn't put him back together. So why even try and charge me that amount knowing that he wasn't restorable to a viewing standpoint? So did all this work and then you tax me and I'm going through grief, so now you're charging me $14,000 on top of all the other grief I'm going through. Now that's the people I would have went after.
And that it was like 14,400, something like that. That was for, I don't know what they call it. They have a term, but you put them in the casket temporarily, for the thing, and then they take them out and they cremate them. I mean, this was not a plot. This was not a burial. I got had, and I'm very disappointed that they did that. Profoundly disappointed.
Yeah, no, yeah, I'm sorry that you went through that. I'm just, wow, everybody. I'm just, this is fantastic. I'm just, this is one of those episodes where, let's keep going. But I'm looking at the time. I'm like, we got to wrap it up. Oh, man. No,
and subsequent, I moved out to the Midwest. I'm very grateful to be out here. It's been a big change. I really do feel it's a lot to take in. There was a time I would Google NDE plus depression, NDE plus confusion, because when you're dead and you come back, it is seriously a lot to take in. To realize one of the things that happened to me, I guess, I was in the hospital for 4 days. I guess around day 1 or day 2, I don't even know. But a nurse came in to check me. And my feet and the lower part of my legs were still covered in dried blood, and all the trauma and all the upset and all the stuff going on. My feet, I still need to be cleaned up. So the nurse said, well, we're going to fix this up. And she went and got a basin of warm water and a cloth. And she came in, and I'm on 100% bed rest. They did not want me to move off the horizontal position. But she came in and she took that washcloth and so tenderly washed my feet and cleaned me up and patted my feet dry very gently. And as she did that, I heard the angels say to me, how very Christ-like. And then I also heard them say, if this had gone the other way and you were laid out at a funeral home somewhere, probably some woman, some hard worker would be doing the very same thing with just as much love and tenderness. And it really, I don't know, that really impressed me deeply. That there are a lot of good people who do the right thing, the humble thing, even when no one's looking, just because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I can't think of a better way to wrap it up right there. That is awesome. I go, man. Everybody, please go. I'm going to share up on here. Go get her book right now. Yeah, I said you can go right here to temporarydeath.com. There's her site. You can has a link right here. You just click buy now on Amazon, or you can go to amazon.com. It's right there, paperback or Kindle version. Get those. I said just reach out. Thank her for being on the show. Just if you got other questions, you just said right there. You got the contact, location. But man, I just, it's an amazing story. It really is. Thank you. And I can't thank you enough for sharing it, because I'm like, I don't know about everybody else, but an hour and 24 just flew by. Usually it's one of those things, like an hour, you get, it's like, okay, we'll try, try. And like this one, I mean, honestly, I could see how this conversation could easily go, 2+ hours, but it's definitely, please everybody, if you can, support her, purchase the book, see if we, that thing. But just once, for like everybody's just saying, thank you, and everybody they're saying in the chat room, for sharing your story. There's been a lot of people that have been taken aback and really impressed with you and everything, what you've gone through. It's like, thanks for coming in. I don't know what else to say. I really don't. Well, it's definitely humbling. Thank you.
Very much so.
Yeah. So take care of yourself. I mean, I really appreciate you taking the time tonight. I said the best of luck to you. I said, and look forward to at some point, catching back up with you and seeing how things are going. That'd be great. So everybody, once again, please go get the book. Rosemary, thank you so much. Really appreciate it, and we'll be in touch. Like I said, I hope the best for you. So enjoy the cornfields. Go.
It's time.
Yep.
They're growing right now as we speak.
Yes. That's one of those things. I mean, that's got to be something that's cool. You just walk out your back door and just corn on the cob. You don't even have to. The farmer's yelling at you to get out of the fields, but you're still, it's just, I'm hungry.
Unfortunately, I have to drive a little bit to see them, but that's okay.
Yeah, that's one of those. It's little funny. It's like you go to the store and you get these little ridiculous things that are like this, and they're these super skinny ones. And then when you actually go to these fields, I don't know if anybody. I mean, these are giant. When you actually get the ones that are actually grown out there, it's like you see the ones that are mature, and you wonder, it's like, where the hell are those in the store? I don't see these things. I get these little ones that look like these little mutated little mini corns.
Well, I think here in where I am in the southwestern part of the state, a lot of it is for ethanol.
That could be. Yeah. So you got to
putting a lot of corn in gas tanks right now.
Yep. Nothing like burning your food. Nothing like burning your food source.
A lot of corn and gasoline in gas tanks right now.
Indeed.
Yeah. All right. Well, so once again, thank you so much. Appreciate it. So everybody, this episode was brought to you by ourselves, because we're still waiting for a sponsor. So go to 3beerspodcast.com. We're sponsoring ourselves here, folks. So you can help us sponsor ourselves by purchasing things like the shirts, coasters, stickers. You can go to Laura. Laura is one of our Patreons. So, she's our Patreon. So we really appreciate her for, helping us out with that. You can go to redbubble.com, and that is also our, Three Beards podcast. You can buy our gear through that, or you can get to it through our website itself. We are rebroadcast every Wednesday after Into the Outer Realms on ERRT Radio every Wednesday at 11 p.m. ish, just depending on, how you get when their show gets done. You can also, like I said, just check us out on all social media. Like, share, subscribe on YouTube. Something help us get to 1,000 on all those things. It really helps us get these shows out. But just want to thank everybody for watching. Like I said, really appreciate it. We will be back next week. So once again, go support her. Go pick up those book for her and check out her other ones, especially if you're into. It was architecture, right? Is that what the other ones?
Indeed.
Yep. So go check it. She's got 9 other books that you can pick up, support her that way as well. So, all right, everybody. Thank you. We will see you next Wednesday. Good night.
Good night.